welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Jay Stevens Podcast. This is episode 43, dedicated to the young star that played for the only team north of the border in the association, Mr. Pascal Siakam. And as always, thank you for listening and downloading to another episode of the podcast. Remember to always subscribe, rate, and review. It's a great way for people that are searching for a new podcast to listen to come across this one. Then remember to always get the word out about the podcast via word of mouth. The things that we enjoy in life, we are more willing and somewhat wired to tell other people about. So no matter if this is your first episode or if you have been listening to episode 1, be sure to people know about the podcast. Like I mentioned on Thursday's episode number 42, that we're going to have another guest on the podcast. Well, that day is today. Mr. Ronnie Roberts, a young man that I went to high school with, joined me for a fun conversation. Our conversation took place during the Giants and Bears football game Sunday afternoon. So that is why him and I both make references to that particular game. There was a slight issue with the recording. We were trying to record via the Anchor app, and Anchor provides a great way for podcasters like myself to record episodes with two people or with people that are not in the same location. Well, one thing you need to enjoy that function via the Anchor app, and Anchor hosting being the host of this podcast, is working functional Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is working, that's functioning properly the entire time of the recording of the conversation. What happened? Well, all of a sudden in the middle, my Wi-Fi, yes, it was my fault. The Wi-Fi in my apartment, it crapped out. It blinked for a hot second, and all of a sudden our recording stopped. Well, we had to go to plan B. So if you hear that one portion of the episode sounds a particular way and the other portion sounds a different way, audio-wise, that is why. My Wi-Fi crapped out, so we had to go to plan B to record the rest of the episode. Also, we will be having an episode on Thursday. I know Thursday's Thanksgiving, and a lot of people will be with family and friends enjoying and giving thanks for the lives that we have been blessed with. But I am not going to stop. I am still going to be dropping an episode Thursday morning like normal. So you'll be able to enjoy that driving to grandma's house, driving to your friend's house, wherever you're going on Thursday on Thanksgiving. You could definitely listen to this episode, listen to the podcast, and also let someone know that you're with, enjoying Thanksgiving dinner with, or Thanksgiving football with. Let them know. Tell them. Let them hop into and listen to the Jay Stevens Podcast. You never know. They may want to be a regular listener just like you. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a trip to Chicago, Illinois, and listen to a fun conversation that I had with Mr. Ronnie Roberts. Hey, Ronnie, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, man, no problem. You live in Chicago. I live in Indianapolis. With the Colts not playing today, where I'm watching the Bears play right now, I know there's been a lot of talk all year about Mitchell Trubisky, the Bears, their offense, what's going on. What are some things you have heard or you have seen about this offense, the Bears, and primarily Mitchell Trubisky?
Well, I guess we could start off by saying, Mitchell Trubisky, having the Bears move up a couple years ago to take him, as their first pick in the draft, it kind of got people's heads scratching as far as why would they trade up to get a guy from North Carolina to where they could have drafted Mahomes out of Texas Tech, or they could have went with Deshaun Watson out of Clemson, coming off of that national championship game. So, people here in Chicago are obviously scratching their heads, one, as far as why is the lack of production from Trubisky and a number of other players that are on the Bears offense. Now, I was watching the pregame as well as some of the statistics in the early part of the Bears game, and they said that he averages 176 yards passing per game.
Oh, wow.
And then also 5.6 yards per attempt, which, heading into those stats, it got me thinking one of two things, or a couple of things rather. One, he doesn't have a good quarterback vision or consistency throwing the ball, or he doesn't trust his offensive line to give him the ability to make plays down the field or dump it off instead of getting sacked. So, for me, and if you don't mind me carrying on into the Bears team and in total.
No, go right ahead.
The Bears team, in my opinion, is pretty much in the middle half of the NFL rankings. Their offense is probably, if not dead last, I guess you can argue, New York Jets, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Cleveland Browns of all teams rather. to be ranked in those teams it's kind of a little embarrassing because you go out and get Trubisky expecting the team to be in the top half of the rankings, but they're not.
Right.
And then also their defense is kind of what's holding them together. With Chuck Pagano, all Indy fans are familiar with Chuck Pagano. And by his guidance, they're ranked between 8th and 9th in the NFL in defense. That's total defense. Obviously, the rankings split between, pass rush, run tackle, that kind of jazz. So some people would say, the lack of success is due to the coaching. Obviously you can argue if you're just a regular NFL fan, but, you and me watching it every day, watching it all the time, we can pretty much specify it takes every player to come together to play as a team.
100%.
So if Trubisky goes down, obviously you got Chase Daniel coming in, but it's not like he's, Tom Brady or anybody to put up huge numbers or, give you the wow factor, as far as showing you how a quarterback should play. But obviously with that being said, you need Tariq Cohen to stand out, Allen Robinson, David Montgomery, there's a number of other players, Khalil Mack can only do so much. So, with that, it's kind of the Bears. It's kind of I wouldn't say a one and done year. It's pretty much they're 4-6, they're leading 19-7 over the Giants. The Giants aren't, a ridiculously good team either. Obviously they have talent, but at the end of the day, you need to be 19-7 against the Eagles or 19-7 against the Cowboys, to actually put yourself in that position to, succeed and move up in the rankings and consider yourself a future playoff contender.
Correct.
So, yeah, I think that's my Indy, roots, on the Chicago Bears.
Now, when I was thinking about this and Trubisky, the Bears, their offense, everything that goes into that, I was just wondering, and I want to ask you this question, something that popped in my head. Would you consider this just an early career slump? Most of your good quarterbacks or great quarterbacks in year 1, year 2, year 3, sometimes year 4, if they get that far, a lot of times they have a slump. You and I both watched Peyton Manning throughout his career, and he had an early career slump. Now he bounced back and he's an all-timer, but would you consider Trubisky, he could be a good quarterback, but this is just one of those fluke years where he's just slumping and not playing up to the caliber of quarterback that he can be?
That's a good point. I'm glad you kind of brought that up as far as not necessarily similarities to Peyton. Heck, Tom Brady was handed the Patriots on a silver platter as far as what, Drew Bledsoe had already established already and, that ridiculous defense. But at the same time, getting back to Trubisky, he's in year 3, year 4, if I'm not mistaken?
Year 3.
So, being in year 3, look at Russell Wilson coming out of Wisconsin. As far as he didn't have a slump coming into the league, he had a really good offensive line. Of course, he had Marshawn Lynch, and then their defense, the Legion of Boom. Most people are saying that's the best defense, since the '85 Bears. So, For me, with Trubisky, I think he's getting hurt because he's holding the ball too long. Obviously, his injury consistency is 1 to none. Earlier in this game, with the Bears and Giants, he got tackled and his leg kind of buckled a little bit and he was up limping around. So they showed Chase Daniels getting loose around on the bench. And, long story short, I wouldn't say it's an early career slump. I think Mitchell Trubisky had a hard time adjusting from, jumping from North Carolina to being, the quote unquote superstar outcoming into the NFL to get, with the Bears. So for me, obviously having trust in your offensive line, as far as me being an ex-offensive lineman, we went to the same high school and played football together. But, for me, my objective is to, make sure that, Zach Morris, at the time, didn't wind up on his back all the time. So, I didn't get to play on Friday nights like I wanted to, but that's a different story. So, getting back to Trubisky, I think for him, he's just scared. Like he's running scared. Like if he can't get rid of the ball, he's getting tackled. Or, for me, like I said, injuries are pretty much going to shorten his career. I would say maybe by year 6 or 7, he might retire. That's just me speaking because of the rate that he's getting hit. He's 20 for 34 for 250. This is a different quarterback than we've seen since week 1. And, for him, getting those guys, like Allen Robinson and Taylor Gabriel and then Anthony Miller, I think the tight end involved, takes the burden off of him, and then it gives the city of Chicago and the Chicago Bears courage, be like, hey, yeah, we drafted a decent quarterback. He just needs to have confidence in himself, and he needs to be able to get rid of the ball.
I was watching this game. Well, I actually was able to watch it early on from the beginning. Sometimes church kind of overlaps when I get home late, things like that. But a lot of the throws that he was throwing today, it wasn't like – sometimes it was just him making like regular like quarterback mistakes. So you're not going to be perfect every single game. But a lot of the balls were right on target. I saw he hit his tight end right in the hands, and then he dropped it. Then the interception that he threw when he was in the red zone, that's going to go out down as an interception and look as a knock on him. But it could have been a mishap. It looked like it was a miscommunication between receivers with poor spacing. You allow Ogletree to basically defend two guys, be right in the middle of them, and get the pick. Hopefully this is just a sign of things to come down the road. But I don't know, man. I mean, today he's playing decent. Like you said, better than what we expect. But I kind of like this Trubisky we're seeing today, except for, like you said, he holds the ball too much. I'm sure you probably see more Bear stuff than I do. I watch more Colts when the Colts and Bears are on TV. Is him holding the ball too long? Is that something that happens every single week?
I mean, from the games I've watched, in the past, like I said, he's scared to where he assumes that his offensive line is only going to hold for 3 or 4 seconds. Now, your average or higher average quarterback tends to get the ball out between 2.5 and 3.5 seconds. And I mean, look at Tom Brady; he's out in 2.5 seconds. If Wilson can't get the ball out, he's running around. The same with Mahomes. That's what separates the good quarterbacks from the great quarterbacks. And you also mentioned the interception in the end zone. That, for me, in my opinion, that's his lack of quarterback vision, his QB vision. Yeah. I mean, he's not 6 foot. I mean, he's 6'2", 6'3", somewhere in there.
That. Yeah.
So he's able to see over his huge offensive line, and maybe he didn't see Ogletree. He was sitting back there like a Sydney Duck. So, for me, he should have dumped it off to Tariq Cohen, or he should have dumped it off somewhere to where if they got in 4th down territory, bless their kicker, he could settle for 3 points. So, in my opinion, it's just having the courage and then going out there and playing like you're playing for your job. So for me, I wouldn't say it's a one and done year for Trubisky, but maybe they'll go the different route and put all their faith in Chase Daniel.
Yeah, you never know, man. You never know. Let's move from one quarterback in the Midwest to another, and Jacoby Brissett, a guy who going into the year, no one expected to start. We expected him to be our backup quarterback, even though Andrew Luck missed training camp. We all expected that no matter what, Jacoby Brissett, he may start week 1, week 2, but Andrew Luck would come back. Andrew Luck's not here. Jacoby Brissett's playing this season. Been okay, had a good game, been kind of better than what we expected at times, somewhat of how we expected at times. How do you view Jacoby Brissett and how he's played this year?
With Jacoby Brissett, I mean, he sat behind Tom Brady, so he sat behind, quote unquote, in everybody's opinion besides mine, is the greatest quarterback to ever play. Now, people can argue that, Tom Brady, had the fundamentals and everything to, continue to play at a high rate or a high level to where he was one of the slowest quarterbacks to ever come out of the NFL draft. And plus, he was a 6th-rounder out of Michigan. So most people specify, what if he wound up, with the Cleveland Browns or wound up with somebody else besides the Patriots? Would he have 6 rings? Obviously, people can argue and say he could have 1 or 2, but the defining factor is he wouldn't have 6 rings. Right. Now, with Brissett, coming out of NC State, there was a high momentum change from NC State to the pros, and he was probably jumping for joy when he got drafted by the Patriots. But, when the Colts got him, it was pretty much they were serving him up on a silver platter specifying, hey, you backed up Tom Brady. We've seen previous games to where you've kind of lit it up when they were blowing people out. So why not have you come in and back up Andrew Luck? And, with Andrew Luck, we'll hit on that for a little bit. So for a moment, rather, Andrew Luck was a big blow to the team, obviously because he retired. But, with that, the Colts had so much to look forward to, obviously making the deep run in the playoffs, having Luck at quarterback. Pretty much once he retired, that's old news. Brissett's up. He's the new sheriff in town. So for me, Brissett, he has played mediocre, but he's had, in my opinion, the best offensive line or the second behind Dallas and Kansas City. To bring somebody in like Quentin Nelson, one player to come in and be like, hey, guys, let's go out and knock these guys off the line, pancake them, and have fun while we're doing it. For me, what's capitalizing for Brissett is that offensive line. As long as they can hold for 10 or 15 seconds, however long it takes Brissett to get the ball out, then he should be a superstar. But at the same time, his inconsistency, this last game, he went 16 for 25 for a buck 29. They relied more on the run game. Obviously Marlon Mack Mack is out. I'm sorry. Jonathan Williams rushed for, 104 yards. Naeem Hines ran for another 51. So they kind of relied on the running game this time. But for me, his hurdle is he can't close out games. Obviously, he can't get off of the bench. He has to scramble for his life if he's not passing it or running it, or rather, to where they can't get off the field and convert on third down. And that's kind of what's killing them. So the main thing that I kind of circled in my notes here is the fact that they have a hard time closing out games. They can't capitalize on third down. And they just can't really make the plays when they need to be made. Obviously their key objective, T.Y. Hilton, one of the fastest guys in the NFL, probably one of the more consistent hands, but yet he was targeted 3 times for 18 yards. Eric Ebron had four receptions for 44 yards. That's a tight end. Jack Doyle the same, had 3 balls. Obviously the list can go on as far as the achievements the Colts could have had if they would have capitalized on third down. Now, obviously, going against Deshaun Watson, Hopkins, Fuller out at Notre Dame, they could have went for far more points than 20 points on the Colts, to where, the defense is coming around, but they weren't able to get to Watson. The key thing is getting to Watson. And, with Brissett, just stay consistent. He has somewhat of a quarterback vision. He has courage because that offensive line's built like a wall. So at the same time, look for open receivers. If you can't find anybody downfield, dump it off. At least you're going to get 3 or 4 yards instead of taking a sack or throwing an incomplete pass.
I'm going to play devil's advocate real quick in regards to Jacoby Brissett and how he's played this year. Do you think, and some people may say this, do you think that his inconsistencies in every single game or almost every game this year are due to the injuries at the wide receiver position and due to the tight ends, Eric Ebron, not being consistent like he says he should be or he can be?
Well, for me, when you're naming, obviously there's injuries at the wide receiver position, but I guess everybody's saying, Tony Dungy, next man up. So if T.Y. Hilton goes down, Chester Rogers goes down, you have Zach Pascal, Marcus Johnson. You have some guys I've never heard of before that are, stepping in and, making plays or at least trying to attempt to catch the ball. But Eric Ebron and Jack Doyle, Jack Doyle should be your number 1 and Eric Ebron obviously number 2. But I think Eric Ebron kind of runs around with his head on a swivel because he's either, one, afraid to catch the ball because he's going to get, pretty much blasted, or he's got stone hands to where he can't hold on to the ball. So, I wouldn't say the inconsistency from Brissett is the wide receivers, because you can dump it off to the running backs or just dump it off to Hilton or Ebron for 3 or 4 yards. But you see teams that have, players that are getting off the practice squad that are averaging 40, 50 yards of reception, obviously because of their open and the quarterback isn't afraid to throw the ball. So for me, watching the Colts and watching all the other teams, they have a cadence that they go through. So as the saying goes, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So, Brissett, they feel like they're getting by on the ground and they're getting by throwing here and there, to where that's not going to hardly get the job done, to where in the last, 9 games of the season this time, the games that they've lost, they've been 7 points or less, to where, we shoot back and be like, they can't close out games. The key thing is closing out a game, converting on third down, making sure you're the last person blasted through the line to stop, whomever's running the ball or whoever's trying to catch the ball. So the inconsistency, in my opinion, is not the wide receivers. Obviously, it could be the tight ends because the majority of them have been healthy. I think it's just more along the lines of completing the passes and not, putting all your burdens on the running game.
Have you ever thought about making your own podcast? It seems like that's the in thing right now. Well, do I have the people for you? Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and extremely easy to use. And now, Anchor will match with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid for podcasting right away. To get started, go to anchor.fm/start. Once again, that's anchor.fm/start.
All right, Ronnie, you did a good job. You've already touched on the Colts team a little bit, quarterback, the offensive line, wide receivers, the tight ends. What were you thinking before the season about how the Colts would be this year? Would they win the AFC South? Would they make the deep playoff run versus how they played now? Had your thoughts changed from before the season to now as far as winning the division, going to a deep playoff run, or things like that?
Well, I think the key thing when you think about the start of the season, you're thinking of, is Andrew Luck going to come back? And all of a sudden he retires, 2 weeks or so before the regular season started? So for me, it was just more of a toss-up as far as if the Colts were going to be dead last or if they were going to be playing for the number 1 pick. And then obviously of all things, they asked Brissett to, step up, give him a nice 2-year, I think it was $30 million contract. Obviously take the team by the reins and see how far we can go. So obviously having a record of 6-5, that's not terrible. Obviously we could have been 7-4, or we could be, undefeated, but obviously the key thing is closing out games, and capitalizing on, mistakes that could have, prevented us from losing the game. Drop passes, not closing out, on third down. The list goes on. For me, every year you thought, we were going to make the playoffs. One, we had, Peyton Manning, and we had that ridiculous tight end receiving core with Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison, Dallas Clark, you name it. We pretty much had the keys to the right vehicle to get us to win the AFC South, to make a deep run into the playoffs, and then obviously being a Super Bowl contender. So looking at those teams compared to looking at this team now, I would like to see us go 11-5 and possibly get a playoff spot or even get a wild card. So, for me, the clear objective is to make the playoffs. Now, obviously, people are going to argue if we don't make the playoffs, Frank Reich needs to be fired. The defensive coordinator needs to go. Chris Ballard, needs to go somewhere else too. So, for me, if the team's firing on all cylinders, we should have the best possible chance, rather, of winning the game if we pretty much capitalize on those points that I mentioned prior. So, for me, yeah, the objective is to win the AFC South, to make a deep push into the playoffs. And then, obviously, with Brissett at quarterback, who knows? You might win a Super Bowl trophy, or you might earn some respect from teams that you weren't respectful, given from in the past. So at the end of the day, yeah, we'd like to see a playoff run. But, I mean, as far as this year, if they drop another game or two, I wouldn't call this a rebuilding stage. I would just severely think about who you're going to have as your quarterback.
Would you, and I think you kind of alluded to this a little bit, would you stick with Brissett going up into next season?
Well, with Brissett, he's still under contract, so he's still got another year where he makes $15 million regardless if you bench him or not. So for me, like I mentioned, if the issue isn't broken, don't fix it. He's doing fine. He just needs to develop that little bit of confidence to where he can extend the play, or he could pretty much, encourage the receiver to break off, of his route, or get further downfield, or check down to the tight end or the running back. So for me, I would leave Brissett where he is. You just got to have more people than Frank Reich and Chris Ballard to have courage in him, to back him up if he throws a pass that, should have been caught, or threw an interception that should have never happened. So for me, that could touch base on, having a better quarterback vision, better consistency. At the end of the day, Brissett's here. Why not utilize him, give him the confidence he needs, and obviously have everybody have his back?
This Colts team, at our best, we went on the road to Kansas City and beat up the Chiefs. At our worst, as embarrassing as this is, we lose to the Dolphins at home. This team could be really good, even throughout the rest of the season. Early before the season started, I had the Colts at 9-7, 10-6. With Brissett winning the AFC South. I know we're going to make the playoffs. That's just how I feel still now. I don't know as far as a deep playoff run if this team is capable of that with the way that they played week after week. Just not really – things have been inconsistent. You're not sure what's going to happen. You're not sure what receivers are going to be there. I mean, my goodness, no one expected T.Y. Hilton to play last week or play a couple days ago. I forgot we played on Thursday. But he played because with Houston, He always has big games in Houston. There was even someone that was at a restaurant there. A local reporter was down there, and someone asked him, the reporter, "Why are you here?" Told them, "Oh, I'm here about to go to the Colts and Texas game." And the local person that's a Texans fan or just lives down there in Houston, they said, "Yeah, the Texans always lose to the Colts." So even going into the game, the fans expect to lose, and somehow T.Y. plays, probably shouldn't have. Our team doesn't play as good as we can, and we lose to a team that a lot of people, well, especially locally, we're saying they were better than Houston. Even people outside of Indianapolis are saying the Colts are better than this. The Colts are a lot better than how they're currently playing. What are people saying around you about how the Colts have played this year?
Well, I mean, being in Chicago, I haven't really heard anything as far as, how the Colts are doing. Obviously up here, they're bleeding, orange and blue for the Bears. So, if you're not rooting for the Bears, pretty much your opinions are overlooked besides the sports fans that, you talk to on a regular basis. Now, me being from Indy, I'll still root for the Colts, and root for the AFC South to, obviously compete and knock everybody else out. But at the same time, I haven't really heard anything as far as negativity from the Colts. Obviously, years past, you've seen them make a deep run into the playoffs. And as you just mentioned, go to Kansas City and beat Kansas City. Beat Mahomes, who is breaking all kinds of records, and he's opening all kinds of doors that a quarterback that's been there for 10 years should be doing. So, the Colts are always going to have that niche with every NFL team around the country because obviously, one, of Peyton Manning, and two, how the organization is ran. So, as long as the Colts perform at their highest, they give everything they have and leave it on the field, there's always going to be somebody chattering about them, if it is as deep south as Florida or as high as New England and Foxborough. So, the Colts are always going to be talked about. It's just depending on who wants to listen.
I remember a post that you put on Facebook. I'm not going to read it, but it was back, I believe it was earlier this month. Vinatieri missed another kick. You made a comment about that. You may remember what I'm talking about. You may not. But Vinatieri's season, no one expected him to play like he has. We've been blessed, and I told someone else recently at work, the Colts have been blessed in the kicking game, not just the kickers, but also the punters. You and I, when we were younger, when the Colts started to get good, we had Hunter Smith. Literally from Hunter Smith, I believe it was right next to Pat McAfee. So you go from one consistent punter right next to another consistent punter, the best punter in the league. And some historians say he could be the best punter of all time. We had Mike Vanderjagt. Literally, from Mike Vanderjagt, I thank God that the Patriots didn't re-sign Vinatieri. We go from Mike Vanderjagt right to Adam Vinatieri. Now, Vinatieri is almost 46 years old, 45, 46 years old. So it's nearing
he's 46, yeah.
Okay, most people don't expect a kicker or an NFL player kicker, no matter what it is, to play this as old as they are. What have you thought this year with Vinatieri, the way he's been kind of inconsistent? Sometimes he's consistent. People talk about all these numbers about Vinatieri. What have you thought about him? Would you have cut him? Would you keep him through the rest of the year if he starts making another streak like he had earlier? Just go about this for me if you could.
Well, I think Vinatieri, obviously coming out of a small school, or what is it, North Dakota State or South Dakota State, who would have thought somebody would have lasted, over 20 years in the NFL. So, yeah, Vinatieri hands down is a Hall of Fame. He's had a Hall of Fame career. Even kicking a field goal in the snow. What is that? The tuck rule. The tuck rule game when he kicked the field goal. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's only a number of kickers that have ever done that. So for me, like I mentioned, he is a Hall of Famer, and he'll be in Canton one day. But like other kickers, that have been playing 15 or 20 years, you're not as young as you used to be, and you can't really go out with your eyes closed and kick 50-yard field goals like it's nothing. Now, you can argue that, obviously, with his inconsistency, as of recently, it could be the holder or it could be the weather. But, he's 46 years old. So for me, with all respect to Vinatieri, I think he should just hang up the cleats and then coach and help these, less experienced kickers in the league, to become better kickers. He's had most players, they strive to get a Super Bowl ring. He's got 3. He's got 2 with the Patriots and 1 with the Colts, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
As far as for a normal player, that's more than enough hardware, for them to retire and feel accomplished. So, at the end of the day, opinions are opinions. Vinatieri's going to quit when he's done. his inconsistency obviously is a number of things, but it can be corrected. But, you know, as we were saying, you know, he's not a spring chicken anymore. His leg has kicked tons and tons of field goals, and it being 46 years old. So, you know, for me, you know, hopefully when he hangs up his cleats, you know, we're able to find a consistent kicker as far as how he's been for the past 23 years, 24 years, if I'm not mistaken, how long he's been in the NFL.
Yeah, I think it's 24. He actually has 4 Super Bowls. He was on all 3 of the early ones with Tom Brady, the Patriots, that whole team there. I just happened to look this up.
Right.
Before we get out of here, dude, we could go on for hours about football. I just wanted to kind of keep it brief right now. You've done a phenomenal job. I appreciate that. A few things. I got 9 different questions here. Give me the first thought that comes to your mind when you hear what I say, and then we'll close this thing out here really shortly. Number 1, the first thing, favorite memory from LC.
Favorite memory from LC. That's a hard one. I think the favorite memory is walking into Coach Fiesel's classroom, and all of a sudden he starts talking about this dinosaur teacher next door, Mr. Carrico.
Oh, dude, I remember
and
that.
You know, hearing those guys go back and forth about, you know, who was alive during the dinosaurs, and Fiesel would say, "Go ask Carrico. He had one as a pet." And, you know, the list can go on as far as the favorite, you know, thing the first time I went to LC. But, you know, for me, it would have to be Fiesel and Carrico.
Yeah, I know Carrico is still coaching at Warren, and I want to say I saw Fiesel on the sidelines on TV at Warren as well. Last time I saw Fiesel was a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. He was retired, enjoying retirement with his grandkids, and then I'm watching a game on TV one Friday night, and I feel like I saw Fiesel on the sidelines again, coaching this time, not just enjoying the game. So he cannot get away from football at all. Next question, Favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Wow. Can I name? Well, I have a handful. Favorite movie? You could probably agree. My favorite movie is Harlem Nights.
Okay.
And Tommy Boy with David Spade and Chris Farley.
Oh yeah. Favorite NBA player?
Favorite NBA player?
This could be now or all time. Don't really matter.
Well, all time, obviously everybody likes Mike. So Michael Jordan, and then obviously you were touching base on your previous podcast about Luka Doncic. I mean, that kid is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So for me, it would be those two, Mike and then Luka.
Something you've always wanted to do but you've never done?
Move to a different state. You know, as far as, you know, I'm up here in Chicago now. We relocated from Indy to Chicago. So for me, I was scared in the beginning, but at the end of the day, we did what was best for our growing family. And I pretty much took the leap of faith, and I don't regret it. So, yeah, it would have to be moving.
Kobe or LeBron? I asked everyone this question, so you probably knew this was coming up.
Yeah. For me, you know, I'd have to go Kobe. You know, everybody's on that, you know, LeBron James bandwagon. But for me, the respect that Kobe should get is the fact that he spent every year of his 20-year career with one team. And he, you know, obviously he complained and he chattered about having these players and those players. And most people would say his success is Shaquille O'Neal or Robert Horry hitting the game winner in the corner, you know, Derek Fisher, you know, the list can go on. But with LeBron, you know, when he started out in Cleveland, he was kind of, you know, ridiculously performer as well. So, you know, for him to leave Cleveland, then go to Miami, then from Miami to, you know, back to Cleveland to specify, hey, I came home to win a championship, and then to give him a slap in the face to where he left Cleveland for L.A. So, you know, at the end of the day, for me, my respect goes to Kobe.
Favorite LC football coach? I think you mentioned him earlier. If it's who I think it is.
It's Fiesel and Carrico.
Okay, give me your favorite memory then. Let's go with the favorite memory.
The one with
other than
Fiesel.
Okay.
The one with Fiesel is we'd all be standing in a huddle, and he would act like he would give you a high five, and then he would give you a low tap. So that was kind of unexpected. And then the way he loved the game, you know, the way he loved coaching kids, coaching upcoming football players. Obviously, yeah, he would get in your backside because you missed a block or you weren't fast enough or you didn't block the right person. But, you know, for me, he was probably one of the more knowledgeable players, you know, coaches rather, that I've ever had in my, you know, middle school and high school career as far as, you know, as a coach, and even some people would say a father figure. just the way he respected you and taught you the right way of how to perform at the best at your position was hands down one of the best memories I've had with Fiesel.
Do you prefer to live in Indianapolis or live in Chicago?
Indianapolis, obviously the cost of living is much cheaper. But, Chicago, we've been downtown Chicago a handful of times already. Nothing beats downtown Chicago. There's something to do, if you're going to Millennium Park or if you're going to Navy Pier or even just driving down Lakeshore Drive. So, for me, I would still, I'd go back to Indy because of the cost of living. But for me, there's a really cool lifestyle here in Chicago. And, we live comfortably with what me and my wife have. So, we try and do with what we have, and we try and get out every weekend and, go see downtown further as far as seeing the sights or going to the museums. So, yeah, I would say, living in Chicago.
I got two more for you. This one may think a little bit. A player in the NBA you never got to watch either at a game or on TV that you wish you could have.
Well, I would say my third favorite player would have to be Steve Nash. Watching him in Dallas, obviously watching him move on to Phoenix. He spent a number of years with Stoudemire in Phoenix, as well as Sean Marion as well. And then going to L.A., to play with the Lakers. That was kind of I wouldn't say the downfall of his career. I think he was mainly on his way out. He was getting older. Heck, he had already won 2 MVPs. He's probably one of your most underrated players not to win an NBA championship. He didn't win a championship with Phoenix or Dallas. So,
nope.
I would have to say Steve Nash. Steve Nash was like watching, Pete Maravich back in the day. I wasn't alive to see him play, but watching videos and highlights of Pete Maravich looked like, Steve Nash modern day. So,
last one. Would you sign Colin Kaepernick if your team needed a quarterback?
Well, and most people would kind of, compare Kaepernick to, like, say, Michael Vick when he had that whole ring of, dogfighting. That didn't really diminish his career. He was still loved by the Atlanta Falcons. Heck, I think he still went on and played for the Eagles, and he played for the Pittsburgh Steelers, if I'm not mistaken. So for me, Kaepernick, he wanted to make a statement, by, specifying, police brutality and all these issues that were going in our country that were being put on the back burner because of the color of somebody's skin. So for me, if your team desperately needed a quarterback, I would give Kaepernick a try because all of the videos and all of the workout tape that I've seen, he's as good as any quarterback in the NFL. As long as he has an offensive line that can block for him and he gets that consistency of throwing the ball to the correct receiver, I shouldn't see why not. I would take a chance on him. Obviously, you could pay him league minimum because he's not worth what he was before, but still give somebody a chance to see what he can do and see if he still has the arm that he used to have.
Yeah, I have my issues with Colin Kaepernick and how he handled himself. Trying to forget the whole situation, even up to his recent workout that he just had. But yeah, there's so many bad. I'm not just saying mediocre. There are a lot of bad quarterbacks in the NFL. It's kind of a slap in the face that he's not even getting a look. I understand why the owners have made the decision that they have, but if winning is what they're all about and making money, I think that a lot of these guys deserve to give Colin Kaepernick at least a personal workout at their facility, not having the NFL organize it. I think it was a good thing that the NFL did that and organized the workout. I think more of these teams should at least give him a look, bring him in, more interviews, whatever it is. Because, if one team, 2 teams, or 3 teams have just a little interview, face-to-face interview, maybe not a workout, that news is going to circulate around the sports world, football world, all that stuff, and we'll definitely hear about that. But, Ronnie, it was great to have you on, man. A lot of fun. We'll definitely have you on again. I really appreciate it.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. And I think as Garrett was saying before, get me on with playoff time. Maybe we could do a 3-way and kind of all give our opinions of what we think about the NFL and where it's going and what teams we think will make the push for the title.
I got you. That's a great idea. I'm going to have to put something together to get that done.
That right there, ladies and gentlemen, was a lot of fun. I really appreciate Ronnie Roberts for coming on and providing great content for us here on the podcast. I also appreciate him taking time out of his busy schedule with his wife and kids on a football Sunday to be a guest on the podcast. I do not take that lightly. We're going to continue to have more guests in the future, so be on the lookout for that. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, we're still going to have an episode on Thursday, Thanksgiving. I know a lot of people may not listen to any podcast, any sports radio shows, sports podcast on Thursday at all. They may devote that entire time to talking with family and friends and spending time with people that they don't see as much as they would like to. So I get it, I understand, but the podcast still will be dropping Thursday morning. If you're with somebody at family dinner, one of your friends, or wherever you are on Thursday on Thanksgiving, and someone brings up sports podcast or has a suggestion about sports podcast to listen to, or even on social media, if someone says, hey, what's a sports podcast you enjoy? Don't hesitate to bring this one up. You never know. A great way to grow this podcast and to get more listeners is word of mouth. I say it all the time, but when you see it work in action, it's an amazing thing to watch. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Jay Stevens Podcast. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Dr_J25. You can follow me on Instagram at Jay Stevens Podcast. You can send all your emails to jstevenspod@gmail.com. Remember to always subscribe, rate, and review. It's a great way for people that are searching for a new podcast to listen to come across this one. Then remember to always get the word out about the podcast via word of mouth. The things that we enjoy in life, we are more willing and somewhat wired to tell other people about. So no matter if this was your first episode or if you have been listening since episode 1, be sure to let people know about the podcast. This has been episode 43 of the Jay Stevens Podcast. I'll see you next time.